Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Hi, folks. Cesar here with you again. Thanks for joining. We have another show. I'm not really excited about the topic, but we need to keep discussing the violence in our country due to the proliferation of assault weapons. And I don't know where to begin, so I called a local expert here to help me out once again. And with us tonight on this very somber show is Hilary Springs. She is with Moms Demand Action. She's a leader. Some of you may have met her, heard from her before this evening. I've spoken to her many times. We're partners in this crusade as much as we can be. Hilary, thank you so much for joining us on yet another event. I know we probably wish we wouldn't have to deal with. It's good to see you, but I really don't like doing these, and I'm sure the feeling is mutual. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Cesar. It's nice to be here talking to you. I wish that we weren't here because of the circumstances, but I so appreciate your commitment to keeping this issue in conversation in our community.
Yeah, it's important to refresh and level set folks on why we do this, right? Why do we need to keep bringing this issue to as many elected officials as we can by whatever means, and informing the public what it is that a group like yours does and why it's so important and why it can make an impact on this issue. Maybe not immediately, but I do have hope that long-term what we're doing will certainly pay off. So just kind of enlighten us a little bit why your organization exists, why Moms Demand Action is imperative and part of this change. And then we'll go on to some of the other topics we discussed.
Well, unfortunately, there is a really tragic parallel to events this week to the formation of Moms Demand Action. Moms Demand Action was founded after the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. It was started as a Facebook group of people who just said this is enough and this is not an acceptable way for us to live. And we need to form and act in ways that counter the narrative that the gun industry has been propagating in our society for so long. So sadly, that was nearly 10 years ago. We come together again this week, facing a very similar tragedy. But in the intervening 10 years, there's been no shortage of other events that have devastated communities, devastated families, devastated individuals. And that's really what our organization exists to work for, is a future free from gun violence. So we engage politically. We advocate for electing officials at all levels of government who understand that there are things that we can do, that the Second Amendment is not a totally unrestricted, freedom to bear arms of all types in all situations for all people. There are reasonable restrictions that we can have and still preserve what's promised in the Constitution. We also really try to advocate open and honest conversations about statistics, what's happening with gun violence in this country, communities that are impacted. We try to make sure that conversations about the leading cause of gun death in this country, suicide, are brought to light, and that people understand actions that they can take to keep themselves and their loved ones safe.
No, I think you've touched on a lot of items there. Let me double click on the one you brought up, and it's, I think, a key reason why we still keep having this. I think the Supreme Court with Heller defined, to your point, it doesn't mean a free-for-all for anyone, anywhere to carry anything, right?
That's right.
I mean, an assault weapon is an assault weapon, right? And no one, I don't think, well, there are a few people that do want a complete ban on any type of firearm. I'm not one of those people. I think you absolutely have responsible gun owners, as you have responsible drivers and anything else. responsible drinkers, responsible anything that involves any level of risk. But I think for too long, the gun lobbies have been allowed to just influence the politics of campaigns. And they have taken the position anything, anywhere, for anyone is completely where this country should be.
That's right. And really, for a long time, gun violence issues were one of these areas where the majority of Americans agree on legislation that should exist that restricts the types of guns that are available to whom and where those guns can be carried. But oftentimes the minority has been the louder voice in the room, the more powerful voice in the room, and for too long really shaped the conversation. So I am encouraged by the increased visibility and the increased voice that the gun violence prevention movement has gained, particularly over the last 10 years. Organizations like Moms Demand Action, but also the Brady Coalition, Gabby Gifford's organization, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. There are many, many organizations that have really had a chance to elevate this issue and have people think more critically about what we accept that our community needs to, like what we accept this issue to be, and to really challenge the gun industry on some of the assumptions that they have made about the points of access that have dominated the conversation.
Yeah, and you bring up another point that just, I'm all over the place on this, but I just get so fired up with. So the weapon that was used just here recently, it was one of the AR-47 styles. So it's a military type assault weapon. And I just want people to think about this. So it's a military weapon. And in the military, that soldier, that infantry, that individual does not get to carry that weapon home and sleep with it under their bed. The military controls who gets to check out that weapon, how many rounds they get, who fires it, what. It is a controlled environment from the military. And there are people that are claiming that type of weaponry or a like weapon should be able to roam free to fire high velocity armor piercing weapons in our society. Right?
Yeah. And there's really, when we talk to people that own guns or guns are part of their family and part of their culture, there's many reasons why people see gun ownership as an important right in this country and an important part of their community, their culture, their history. Oftentimes this comes to issues like hunting or spending time together as a family. These are not military grade weapons that you're taking out to go hunting with your family on Thanksgiving morning, right? Like, what is the reason why we need these weapons of death in the hands of any 18-year-old that wants to get their hands on them?
Yeah, anyone.
That's right.
That's where I why is it that I know why. There's so much influence from the lobbyists to politicians, especially in certain primaries, that absolutely make that possible. And until we address that issue, that's why you'll keep having these laws on the books where an 18-year-old that may not have a license to drive, can't drink necessarily, can buy those types of weapons, even though they may possibly not be emotionally or quite frankly able to cope with that type of responsibility.
That's right. I mean, the ease in which in many states in this country, Texas included, that an 18-year-old can go in and purchase a weapon like this, it's frankly horrifying. The perpetrator in this attack that just happened this week, he turned 18, if I'm correct, on May 16th. So he literally just turned 18, and this is essentially the first thing that he did as a responsible adult. And I use that term, in quotes, a responsible
No,
adult.
and I think, again, sticking on the why this is happening, why this still is a disease in our country, in my opinion, is it's not just like Texas, right? This individual can go ahead and buy it in Texas, but nothing prevents him from then driving to any other state without any type of like conditional, like, hey, this person may have had some mental issues. And in this case, I'm beginning to understand that there were no red flags. Okay,
That's
so
right.
none of those red flags laws would apply. But there were some apparent posts that could have been flagged and could have alerted some folks if we had some sort of process to identify them. And oh, by the way, this individual just bought an assault rifle, right? And look, again, I want to reiterate, I am not against forbidding people from owning guns. And if you're a responsible person, have whatever you want. But just the arbitrary availability to everyone, anywhere, anytime, I think that's where a lot of this comes from.
Well, and you brought up a really important point too that I think we often gloss over, which is because our federal legislation, or because our federal government has failed so mightily at really putting in very basic legislation to protect the safety of citizens nationwide, gun legislation has really fallen to states. But as long as we have interstate commerce, if one state or one locality has rules that are in place to protect its citizens, and a neighboring state, or frankly any state in the country, has looser legislation, there is just, there is a dependence that we have nationwide to address this issue. And a piecemeal statewide approach, while it's better than nothing, it's not, we're not going to get to a more secure society for all until we can really start to address that.
Yeah, no, it's a complex issue. I'm not going to deny that. But the resistance to any type of change or any type of reasonable, and I'll put that in quotes because it depends on your perspective, guidance or limitation. It's just, there's one side that obviously will never accept that for whatever reason until we address the influence of the lobbyists. But I think this really hits home for me, quite frankly, because not only was this a predominantly Latino elementary school, but it's half the population of Herndon, but over twice the size, roughly, right? I'm using rough numbers here. I think it's a 7.5 square mile, and there's roughly 16,000 residents compared to Herndon, 27,004 square miles. So it's a very tight community. Herndon, just about everyone kind of knows everyone else, and there's a few, but I can't imagine that type of horrific impact on a small town. What it would do to just devastate the community. I just don't, why we need to do this, because we can't have children growing up in this type of fear. What kind of kids are we producing?
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're saying too about the impact on the community is so important for us to be considering as we think about what this community will face in the coming months and frankly years. The community as a whole has experienced an incredible trauma, and that's not going to go away just when the news media moves off this story and onto something new. People in this community, they know each other, as you're describing, and similarly to Herndon, they know the schools. Schools are such a central part of a community. It's hard to think of an institution that is more core to the heart and the soul and the future of a community and of people and of families and of their views of their future, which makes tragedies like this all the more heartbreaking and nauseating, if I'm being honest.
No, absolutely. We're completely aligned on this. If we can, let's transition a little bit to what people can be doing. I know, full disclosure, you all inspired me to do something while I was on council here in Herndon. with your all's help and guidance, and with other folks, we were able to get some gun safety legislation passed. Is that sort of thing, people can get involved in, the local, district, state, rep? I mean, what sort of things can people be doing?
Yeah. Well, let me first thank you for your leadership in helping us pass a local ordinance in Herndon restricting where guns can be carried. I'm really proud of the state of Virginia at this point to see the number of localities that have passed similar legislation and that have said, like, no, we're going to protect our local governments the same way that we protect our state and federal governments. So there's a number of ways that people can get involved, and there's a lot of things that you can do. So as always, you can let your elected officials know that this is an issue that's of importance to you. You don't need to provide ideas for solutions, but really just elevating the fact that constituents care about gun safety. Let your state representatives know, let your federal representatives know, particularly at the state level. As I'm sure many of your viewers know, our state government is really tight in terms of politicians who believe this is an important issue right now. And so we just need to continue to support those who are supporting legislation that keeps our communities safe.
No, and that's key. And full disclosure for the viewers, there were 7 members on council that considered the ordinance. And the ordinance, by the way, it had nothing to do with confiscating guns. I mean, you should have heard and read some of the emails that we got. It had nothing to do with taking your guns out of your home or anything. It was merely banning them from council chambers where the body legislates and not bringing them into town facilities. And you would have thought that, well, based upon the emails and the comments, that the council was going to instruct the police to go round up people and take their guns. And funny enough, and I don't want to use, strange enough, 3 of the 7 council members didn't support it. And this is what I mean by there's some influence out there, and I don't know what it is, but it's almost like we've accepted, this wide open carry anything, anywhere for anyone at any cost. And I got to throw this out to people. So the cost of the 3rd and 4th graders' lives is the price of the freedom you want. I mean, maybe I'm in a dark place right now, but what do we have to do, to get an effect on this? And we're talking a little bit about working with local legislators. So can people find them on your site, or how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so the best way to find the contact information for your local delegate and state senator is by going to the Virginia government website, where you can put in your zip code, your address, and get direct contact information for your elected official. So we will be having elections again in Virginia, not this fall, but the next fall after that. But there's a whole legislative session between now and then where issues related to this topic are sure to be considered. As a state, Virginia has made incredible progress in the last few years. We went from having some of the worst gun laws in the country to having some of the best gun laws, honestly, in the South. So we've made major improvements, but those laws require the state legislative body to remain behind them. And so it's incredibly important to keep this issue present and keep your voices heard by those in Richmond, because really that is the most powerful tool that we have from a policy perspective, at least in the short term.
Yeah, I think sorry, go ahead.
I did want to offer one other thing that people can do that we'd love as an organization to have more conversations about. And that is securing firearms if you are a gun owner and asking about the presence of firearms, even if you're not. It is so incredibly important to take gun ownership responsibly. And if we talk about school shootings, in a majority of cases, the weapons used in school shootings are taken from the home or from family members. They are accessible to children to take to school to perpetuate violence on other children. So if you own a gun, keep it locked, store ammunition separately, and make sure that you are taking full responsibility for the freedom that you have to own that piece of equipment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the small asks, right? I mean, we put matches away.
That's right.
we childproof homes. So I think going back to the local impact, I think because at the federal level right now, I see that as such a huge lift. And I know locally where I live in the northern part of Virginia, certainly the representatives for Congress, Congresswoman Wexton, Congressman Connolly, Congressman Beyer, they certainly are aligned with the reasonable side of this issue. But it just gets too big, right? I mean, one party's resistance, the other party can't come to terms on even like rules of the Senate, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's got to happen locally. So and that's why I think Moms Demand Action is so important, at least for me personally, I think, because it really takes that local energy and then amplifies it out, right?
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. And that's really what we try to focus on. I mean, I think for too long too, we haven't really had the ability to have political and policy conversations at the local level where so much important governance happens. And so, you know, the fact that we've been able to regulate carrying in public local facilities has been a huge win for us. But there's also work that we can do in terms of how we even talk about guns and gun safety in our public schools. Starting this year, Fairfax County, for example, has been providing information about safe gun storage, which is such a basic piece of education. You know, we talk to parents about so many different types of issues about keeping their kids safe. This should naturally fit into that part of the conversation. And I'm proud the school board has decided to include that in the conversation, but there's resistance, right? Like I mean, obviously going into conversations about education, we're hearing resistance about many, many things right now that, in my opinion, should not be controversial. But, you know, there are acts that we can take at the local level that say we are a community that value the safety of our neighbors, our children, our parents, our friends. And we understand that there are acts that we can do to continue to keep us all safe.
Yeah, and that's an important point, by the way, because look, I've heard some crazy proposals like, well, we need to train teachers on how to shoot. It's like my sister, God bless her, when she was was a teacher in Montgomery County, and I love her to death, but she would do anything to protect children, but she's not the person you want wielding a gun. You know, and I just, again, nothing against my sister and teachers, just we ask them to do so much, and that to me is just not a serious proposal.
It's absolutely not. And there's oftentimes after tragedies like we've recently experienced, there's a corner that wants to harden schools, and that is not the answer. That is, I mean, are reasonable safety measures important? Absolutely. Are creating like low grade prisons for our children to attend daily to learn? That's not an environment that we would we would want to send our children to. And that is a cop-out for looking at where the root of the real problem is.
Right, right. I don't know, Hilary, I think, again, as we get wider in this sort of problem, I just think the most powerful, impactful, meaningful thing people can do is act locally, right? And that's why I wanted to talk to you about it and get my head out of this dark funk that I'm in this week, and just inspire some people and empower them. And I just thought of you all in your organization. So I would encourage anyone that's listening that's been moved enough to do something once and for all to contact you guys to really, amplify and exponentially send the message to the local officials that this is enough. I mean, we got to fix this.
I'd love to share with people as well that June 3rd is National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And there are events taking place across the country, but also across Northern Virginia and other parts of the state that people are welcome and encouraged to attend. You can find events at wearorange.org. And like I said, June 3rd, National Gun Violence Awareness Day. We recognize the day by wearing orange. So I encourage you to put on an orange shirt and share with others like why this issue is important to you.
Great. Now, again, as we wrap up here, I just want to again thank you, your organization, so much for all the work you're doing. It's not a lost cause. I believe this is something that will change. It may take a long time, but I think it's certainly worth pursuing. And please keep doing what you're doing. However, we can help. If you have information you want to send, I'll disseminate it on the June 3rd event. Whatever it is we can do, we're here to help.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And I retain hope, right? I would not be in this fight if I thought it was a lost cause. I get up and I do this work because I know that there is an impact that we can make.
Hilary Springs, local leader here in the Northern Virginia, Herndon Reston area for Moms Demand Action. Please reach out to them and let's make a change. Hilary, again, thank you so much for your time, and we will talk soon.
Caitlin, be serious. Now take the oath. Come on. I'm totally taking this seriously. Okay, I'm ready. You may begin. I pledge that I will never meet in person with anyone I first met online without checking with my parent or guardian. And furthermore, if my parent or guardian agrees to the meeting, it will be in a public place and my parent or guardian must come along. Do you pinky swear? I do.
When you teach your kids about internet safety, they'll pass it on. For more information, go to cableclicksmart.org.
Do you love sports? Then you should know about STEM. Because maximizing nutrition, analyzing peak muscle performance, calculating the perfect shot, and more are all made possible by science, technology, engineering, and math. In fact, there are more careers than ever in sports science. So if you have a passion for sports, then think about getting involved in STEM and improve everyone's game on and off the field. Get inspired at shecanstem.com.
I'm a first-generation Filipino American. You don't always feel you're a part of the country you live in. It's this weird middle space sometimes that you have to live inside of. But when you meet others that are also living in that space, you'll learn to know that it's its own unique space too.
Maria, so how's work?
It was fourth period biology. Our students just weren't getting how easily viruses spread. So Miss Bell and I had them role play a zombie virus outbreak. By the time they had all learned the lesson, all the living were dead. Hey, how's your job going?
That big sales meeting I planned? Next year, I might get to go.
Cool. Before we celebrate the freedom most Americans have, we must fight for the freedom all Americans deserve. Because all lives can't matter until Black lives matter.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Thanks for coming back to our show. We have another special guest this evening. And if you haven't met him, you've probably heard of him. Alex Rodriguez, not the baseball star, but the amazing public servant. He's an activist. He's been doing this for a long time. I won't mention the number of years, but just a little bit of background. He has a development background. He's owned his own management consultant company. He has worked, actually, he was a candidate for Congress back in '98, I believe. He has worked for the Department of Treasury. He has served and worked under Governor Dukakis, part of the chamber, the city of Cambridge. And he's done a lot of things, certainly in the Boston area, but we're very lucky. He and his family have moved down to Northern Virginia, and they've become part of the Herndon community. Alex, sir, welcome so much to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I wanted you to come on and enlighten and update the people, because we've been kind of working, and you've been spearheading and leading the effort to reinitiate the Herndon labor community. And you can talk to us about the Herndon Labor Support Center and where we are in that. But first, I want to kind of like bring everyone up to date on why this is necessary, why this is being done, why it's needed for this community.
Well, the why was obvious if you have eyes and you drove down Eldon Street in Cornerville and in Alabama, or to the McDonald's or other places in town. You saw people on the street trying to get work, and under horrible conditions, under 110-degree weather and 20 degrees in the wintertime. And it struck us that why don't we find a place inside where these people could do this? And then, of course, the history of what had happened 15 years ago here in Herndon with an anti-immigrant movement to get rid of public funding for a center that did exist came to mind. And we decided that the approach we would use would not be a public funded approach, but a private funded approach, that we would raise money. But first, we had to have the engagement of the laborers. The engagement of the laborers was important. So people like you and others in our community showed up on Friday mornings at the 7-Eleven on Alabama and Eldon, and we engaged with this potential labor force or actual labor force, and we watched how they got their jobs. It was a little humiliating and not guaranteed to get them the hourly that they deserved. We saw their problems, and we asked if they wanted us to assist them in a solution. We had several meetings at the Resource Center on the other side of Alabama's and Eldon in the shopping center. 30, 40 people would show up at each meeting, and we'd have wonderful donations of food to feed people for a dinner that night. And we'd have the laborers show up and tell us what they would like done. And I would say 90% of them wanted to go along with the concept of finding a permanent home where they could gather together and where job requests would come in. And if they had the skill base, that they would go first come, first serve and take those jobs. That this would be a safe environment where they could enter the center, do English language training and learning, where they could learn some skills such as drywall work and other skills that they might need to help people, where we would try to match those skills to what people were looking for labor. And we started that. And then we ran into a thing called the pandemic. And when the pandemic happened, I was happy to see that with your assistance, we distributed masks and these laborers were the first one to walk around Herndon with masks at the beginning of the pandemic. They understood the need for public safety.
Yeah, you're touching on an incredible amount of points there. I mean, this need was coming from the community, right? As to why we were doing this, or why you've taken the lead on this is what the community asked for. And it wasn't like an outside push. They'd become used to kind of like operating in this sense. And I think when the funding was pulled out, things sort of went, chaotic. So this has been a need for a long time. So I'm glad those are being addressed. Talk about some of the, the challenges of why, again, the not getting paid issue, right?
Oh God, we have stories.
Yeah.
We have stories. The worst one was a couple of kids were picked up on the corner of Eldon and Alabama and taken all the way to Iowa to do 1 month's labor out in Iowa. And at the end of their work, they were driven east and dropped off in a field and never paid. I mean, that was a horror story. And they made their way back here because they had family in town. We have others of the humiliating way of a truck driving up, needing 3 laborers, when 20 of them rushed to the truck and they sort of settled on $20 an hour to do the job. But the trucker now knows he can bargain with them and get it down to $10 an hour. And some of them will jump in the truck for $10 an hour. We don't want that to be the way it is. People should know that we have 2 other labor centers in the Northern Virginia area, one in Arlington that works well, and one in Centerville that works well. They also had to slow up during the pandemic, but that have rules. The laborers made the rules. We don't want to go forward without people from that community being on the board of directors, calling the shots. We want to satisfy their needs, not my perception of what the needs are. And so we've made sure that I've kept contact with about 50 of them through cell phone contact. And I'm a little surprised about the technological ability of the population. But the most important thing is to get buy-in from the community. I'm not into the do-gooder atmosphere where I can do for somebody without them telling me what they'd like. I mean, it's best. I think the best rule is to do for others what others want done to them.
Yeah, amen. Amen. They and again, it goes back to why this initiative is being received and moving forward now, is because it is responding to the community's needs. It is responding to what they're comfortable with. And at some point, and just for the folks that don't know, the Centerville Labor Center was actually modeled in a large way after the Herndon Labor Center that existed for a while. So they took that, added some best practices, and they are thriving. So it's funny that Herndon now has to reinvent or recapture what was already here. But I think to earlier.
And you realize that's why we don't want to go after public money at first, because that was the argument. They're using public money. Well, let's do it with private money. And I think public money will rationally follow at a later date. And so we're beginning to raise some private funds. But what we need is some 60 good people who want to participate and volunteer and work as board members to carry this on, because I don't see myself doing this for the rest of my life.
So this is a good transition from why we were doing this to what needs to be done, right? And to your point, I think what needs to be done is to certainly inspire more people with what we're doing, and certainly this hopefully can help with getting that message out. but then
Yeah.
empower those people, right?
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, I'm passionate about helping, but I don't know that I can carry much more of this as well. But I will tell you, full disclosure to the viewing audience, I'm currently serving as vice mayor here on the town council of Herndon. I think the town has shifted away from those views and voices that were here back in 2006 and 2008.
Oh,
I
I'm
think
certain of that.
Yeah.
I'm certain of that. I mean, I get phone calls. I got one from a person I know in town the other day who just noticed a posting on Facebook, a conversation on Facebook about it, and said, I forgot you were doing this. How can I get involved?
Yeah.
A simple thing. If each town councilor, the vice mayor, the mayor, gave me 2 friends that are willing to sit on the board or willing to get involved, I'd have 20 people right there, including the people we have already involved. We have another 60 names that have been involved off and on that want to stay involved. And the one thing I've learned in my career, my professional career, as a faculty member at different known institutions, as a community organizer, as an administrator, as a candidate for public office, one thing I've learned is that, 2 of us have more ideas than one of us. 5 of us are going to have a lot better ideas than one of us. And you sit patiently and listen to creative ideas. I want to point out your work and your participation as a volunteer, that you've come up, you were the one that noticed that, these people didn't have winter clothes when we gathered the clothing. You remember? They were freezing, and we had to go out, and we found good, clothing donated. And there was a time during the pandemic that the supply line was drying up at the stores. People were rushing in and buying toilet paper and other things. And this population didn't have the money to front that. And we were able to get a partnership with churches to bring food and the lineup would come, the families would come with their children, and we were able to distribute that food. And all of this without a funding source, we were able to do just by good volunteers. We have to continue that. By continuing that, we disclose more needs of a population and more people who define themselves as day laborers. You realize that in the summertime, high school kids become day laborers. Herndon high school kids. And and I've run into a group of senior citizens, all retired, who are citizens of the country, born in the country, been here all their lives, who decided that they don't want to permanently retire. They want to use their skills, and they want to use their skills and make it available. They need a technological system to join them with the people who need the services. And then in dealing with the Rotary and talking to the Chamber of Commerce members, I find businesses that can't stay open because they don't have a supply of labor. They need a supply of labor. I see us as a nexus to grow in the future, to satisfy those needs technologically. And we have the technological skills in this town. I need some volunteers to sit in front of a computer and say, here's the way we bring this all together. You can go on your computer, your cell phone today, and click in to a Herndon Town discussion. I forgot the name of it, but I have it on Facebook. And you'll see Herndon citizens asking, where can I find a babysitter?
Right.
Where can I find, this supplies chain? Where can I find baby formula? That was on our line well before people looking for baby formula was online, well before the public heard about it. So
that's a great point. That's a great point. And staying on that topic, right? I mean, there's so much that needs to be done regarding this, and you're hitting a bigger point, right? It's grown beyond the need of just one group, specifically, the immigrant community. Anyone could potentially, the way you're envisioning this, can leverage the resources of the Herndon, right, Labor
Anyone.
Support Center, right?
Yes.
Anyone. Because after all, and might be surprising to some people, but it's not just guys out there looking for work. It's women, can cook or babysit or whatever the need is. There appears to be people willing to work.
Our recent labor find has been a young lady who lives in town who just finished her first year at Howard University, and she's back and was able to find a job right at the Marriott at the front desk. Another college student who's raised in this town, went to school in this town, graduated from Herndon High School, who just sitting at Jimmy's, we said, Jimmy's, this kid needs a job. We sent him in. He's working at Jimmy's. I'm not advertising for Jimmy's, but the Mediterranean Breeze needs labor. All our restaurants need labor. The Virginia Kitchen needs labor. I mean, I can name different places that need a steady, dependable supply, and there are people out there looking for those jobs that don't know they're there. So one of the things we have to grow into is a good information and referral system, a connection system where we can connect people to what's obvious, but you don't see this stuff in a newspaper. You don't see this stuff. It's word of mouth because supply line has dried up quicker than we expected. The pandemic came. The society is not, in the labor sense, running smoothly right now. Oh. And as an intervening variable, we can do a lot in this population. But when I say we have to grow the we. We need volunteers. We need
that's the other important thing here, right? Before we shift into like how you're going to accomplish this, let's finish up on what all needs to be done. Again, growing the volunteer pool. Hopefully this serves as sort of a channel or vehicle to, again, I go back to inspiring people to do something and then empowering them to actually be successful. So what else would you envision? Is it help in finding a facility? Is it working or collaborating with county or the town? I mean, what else needs to be accomplished because there's such a huge need out here?
I've learned some things from this taking the road least traveled. In the legislative arena, we need our senator and our town assembly person, our local assembly person, and the legislature to focus on wording of legislation. Wording of legislation should first and foremost always talk about residents. It's residents that need services. Their citizen status is not important. They're residents. They live here.
And then just for the average person, there is a delineation, right? A legal delineation. And there seems to be this notion that if you're a resident, you somehow don't pay taxes.
You pay taxes a lot.
Well, I didn't see the last time I go to pay at the Safeway or something. There's a button that says non-resident, no tax me, please, right?
No.
I mean, everyone pays the gas tax and the meals tax and everything else. So
right, but we also use property owners in legislation as opposed to residents. Property. 1/3 of the people who live in Fairfax County are renters.
Right.
That's 1/3 of your population, and so we do legislation with property owners. An HO.
We are a commonwealth, by the way.
Right, so. I know. But we are you have an HOA in the town of Herndon, populated by people who don't live here, but have investment property, have more to say about how this town evolves than people who live here. Yeah. I mean, that's ridiculous. So we have to deal with that type of language. Right. It is hard. People have to live somewhere. And people complain about where they live sometimes, but those are the same people that are looking for a babysitter. They're looking for a yard worker. They're looking for a roofer. They're looking for construction workers. They're looking for restaurant workers. Go to your McDonald's. Who runs McDonald's? McDonald's is run by a bunch of non-English speaking kids who show up every day. They run the business, and they don't understand that they have the capacity to own a McDonald's, but they do. But the system is not designed for that. And I'm not talking revolution. I'm just talking evolution to meet people's needs.
Yeah, great point. Great point. In the few, we've got a little over 5 minutes here, Alex. And again, I appreciate your time coming on today. I know you're super busy. Let's talk about, how people can get involved. And again, I go back to inspiring and empowering more volunteers. How can people help with this initiative? Because everyone you talk to about this agrees that it is absolutely a necessity. It is absolutely long overdue that this community get some support and some addressing some of their needs. So for the folks that are still, interested, how can they help? How can they get involved?
I used to teach this stuff in, I don't want to throw out pedigree, but I taught at MIT, I taught at Harvard, I taught at Boston College, and when I was in the Boston area. And I used to tell students, absent an act of God, there are 5 steps of change. You identify a problem, we've identified it. There's a population out there looking for work that wants to work, willing to work. We have to get them work. That's the problem that we identified. You have to get consensus that people are willing to pitch in and solve that problem. We have consensus, okay? Not consensus to spend public money just yet, but consensus to join together and try to find a solution. The third thing is you have to have a plan. So we started with a plan, and our plan was to get people inside in a closed facility where not anybody can just walk in. They'd have to have an identification. They'd have to be a member of the institution that we developed, the Herndon Labor Support Center. They'd have an identification card that the place would be private, so no one could just walk in. They'd have to be allowed in. And inside you'd be comfortable, and you'd wait for the work to show up, and you'd go do the work. And while you're waiting, you could learn English, you can do some job training, et cetera, et cetera. So we had that plan. Well, we're going to expand that plan now. And in 5 minutes, I'm not going to talk about the whole expansion, but we're going to write that up and say there's other places to go. And we're going to increase that community to be retirees who have been here all their lives and want to work, and to be students who work in the summertime, and to be people with particular skills that can't find a linkage to the job they need, basically as a job finding situation. That's where we plan to grow. But to grow there, we have to get together face to face again, and membership right now is not willing to do that, because this pandemic is not disappearing. So we will have a call. We'll probably get together on Zoom again to get people together. But there's quite a difference between Zoom and face-to-face meetings. But I'm hoping by September we can be face-to-face meetings again. I'm hoping people get your shots. Please get your inoculations, get your boosters, still be safe. This stuff is still spreading. Be careful. That population out there, as I said, they were the first mask wearers. They have less incidence of COVID than the general population because they're smart. And they know they have to stay healthy or else no one's going to take care of them. I have to congratulate the county of Fairfax for having stepped forward and taken care of those who became ill with COVID. But we got a long road to hoe here, and we need volunteers. I need people to phone up and say, I'm willing, put me on your list. And when we call together, we need a critical mass in Herndon right now of about 75 people who are willing to stay with it for a good 5 years.
Yeah, and I know we just rolled up your contact information there on the screen. So for the folks that do want more information or want to be involved, certainly reach out to Alex. The email is there provided. And real quick, I wanted to touch on something you brought up. It's kind of like the culture there you said they were one of the first or the first to don on masks. They tend to police themselves, don't they?
Absolutely, because they live in. And I hate using they, but a lot of the population shares residence with cousins, etc., and where most of us are used to living 2 people, 4 people to 3, 4 bedrooms. We're talking about 12 people in the same space often. And you have to police yourself. Those kids go to school. Those kids come home from school. Workers don't know the environment they're going to be working in, so they wear their masks. And you'll see them as a roofer. You'll see them doing whatever work they have to do. They'll have their mask on. You'll see them in the grocery stores. You'll see people being careful, more careful than the general citizen population is, and therefore less cases of COVID.
Yeah, I was just, I recall one thing I noticed when I was there. There was one gentleman that was clearly inebriated during the day.
Mm-hmm.
And
Remember?
the other guys rallied and basically said, hey, get your stuff together and get out of here. Right?
Yeah, I remember once, I think you were there, and you said, go, we'll buy you a coffee. And somebody decided to get a wine cooler. And when he walked out, that whole population said, no, you can't do that. You can't do that.
Right,
they made him go back in the store and put it aside.
Right,
this is a population that doesn't want to be associated with rowdy people, with people who who drink. The thing, you hardly see people smoking outside of the 7-Eleven. This is a population that takes care of their health, and very religious, by the way. We've had, as you know, we had a couple of their ministers show up where they go to church, and so it's these are good people.
Yeah, no, Alex, again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for staying on this. Thank you for leading this. We'll have more for the folks that are interested, but I wanted to certainly just, again, give the people an update of what you're doing. I think the work that you and the group are doing is going to really expand. I think people are ready for this. I think people are ready to take the appropriate precautions, and the community really wants it. So God bless you. Thanks for all you're doing. And again, let me know how I can help. And I encourage everyone that's watching this to please reach out to Alex and make sure you understand that he needs your help. So, and that's our show for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And appreciate you all standing by. And we look forward to seeing you on the next show.